Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars drift past the view screen of the USS Liberty. The cargo ship was not much to look at, but she was home to Jake and his small crew. They had been flying together for 3 years. Now, carrying supplies to the outer colonies where few other ships dared to go. "Coffee's getting cold again, Captain," said Amy Carter from her station at Communications. She was young, maybe 25, with bright red hair that she kept tied back in a ponytail. Amy had joined the crew straight from the academy, full of dreams about exploring the galaxy. 3 years of hauling toilet paper and protein bars to frontier worlds had not crushed those dreams yet. Jake smiled and picked up his mug. The coffee was indeed cold, but he drank it anyway. "How much longer to New Haven Colony, Lisa?" Lisa Grant looked up from the pilot's seat. She was older than Amy, maybe 30, with short brown hair and steady hands that could fly a ship through an asteroid field while eating lunch. "About 6 hours, Captain. The cargo bay is secure and all systems are running smooth." "Good," Jake said. He was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his black hair. He had been flying cargo ships for 15 years, ever since he left the Earth Defense Force. The Liberty was his ship, bought with his life savings and a loan that would take him another 10 years to pay off. Danny Rodriguez poked his head up from an access panel near the back of the bridge. "Captain, I need to replace some parts in the engine room when we get to New Haven. Nothing serious, just routine maintenance." Danny was the ship's engineer, a quiet man in his 30s who could fix anything with enough time and the right tools. Jake nodded. "Make a list of what you need. We'll pick up the parts and—" "Captain," Amy interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp with attention. "I'm getting something strange on the communications array." "Define strange," Jake said, setting down his coffee. Mug and Amy frowned at her screen, adjusting dials and pressing buttons. "It's a distress signal, but it's really weak, almost like it's running out of power." Lisa turned in her pilot seat. "Where's it coming from?" "That's the weird part," Amy said. "It's coming from the dead zone between here and the Vega system. There shouldn't be any ships out there." Jake stood up and walked over to Amy's station. The dead zone was a region of space with no planets, no stations, and no regular shipping routes. Most ships avoided it because there was nothing there worth the fuel cost. "Are you sure it's a distress signal?" Jake asked. Amy nodded. "It's using standard galactic emergency codes, but the language? I can't identify it. It's not human, and it's not any of the Coalition species I know. The Coalition was the big group of alien races that controlled most of the galaxy. Humans had been members for about 50 years, but they were still considered the new kids. Most Coalition species looked down on humans as primitive and dangerous." "Could be a trap," Danny said, climbing out of the access panel. "Pirates sometimes use fake distress calls to lure in cargo ships." Jake considered this. Pirates were a real problem in the outer sectors, and the Liberty was not a warship. They had basic shields and no weapons beyond a single laser cannon that was older than Amy. "Play the signal," Jake said. Amy pressed a button, and the bridge filled with a strange warbling sound. It was clearly a voice, but speaking in a language none of them recognized. The voice sounded weak and desperate, fading in and out as if the transmitter was failing. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Jake asked. Amy checked her readings. "Hard to say. The signal is so weak that our sensors only picked it up because we're close. Could have been broadcasting for days or weeks." Lisa stood up and walked over to join them. "Captain, regulations say we're supposed to report unknown distress signals to Coalition Command and let them handle it." Jake knew the regulations. He also knew that Coalition Command was 3 days away at maximum speed. If someone was really in trouble out there, they would be dead long before help arrived. "What's your gut telling you, Amy?" Jake asked. Amy listened to the signal again, her face serious. "Whoever this is, they're dying. The signal is getting weaker every few minutes." Jake looked out at the view screen, where the dead zone stretched out like a black ocean. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe it was some kind of mistake. But maybe it was real. "Lisa, how long would it take us to investigate?" Lisa pulled up a navigation chart on her screen. "About 4 hours to reach the source of the signal. That would put us 8 hours behind schedule for the delivery to New Haven." Danny crossed his arms. "The colony is expecting those medical supplies, Captain. People could die if we're late." "People could die if we ignore this signal, too," Amy said quietly. Jake looked at each of his crew members. They had been together for 3 years, and he trusted them all with his life. But this decision was his to make as captain. The signal warbled again from the speakers, weaker than before. "Lisa, set course for the signal source," Jake said. "Maximum speed." Lisa hesitated. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Jake nodded. "Amy, send a message to New Haven Colony. Tell them we've encountered an emergency and will be delayed. Also send our position and course to Coalition Command, just in case." "What do I tell them about the signal?" Amy asked. "The truth. Unknown distress call from the dead zone. We're investigating." Danny shook his head. "This could get us in trouble with the Coalition. They don't like it when humans go off on their own." "Then we better hope we find something worth the trouble," Jake said. As the Liberty changed course and accelerated toward the unknown signal, Jake stood at the view screen and watched the stars. Somewhere out there in the darkness, someone was calling for help. He did not know who they were or why they were in the dead zone, but he knew one thing for certain. No one should die alone in the void, not if he could help it. The signal continued to fade as they flew deeper into empty space, racing against time and the unknown. The USS Liberty dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that ran through the entire ship. Jake gripped his command chair as the stars stopped streaking and became steady points of light again. "We're here," Lisa announced from the pilot's seat. "I'm running a full sensor sweep now." Jake looked at the main view screen, but all he could see was empty space and distant stars. "Amy, are you still getting the distress signal?" "Yes, but it's much weaker now," Amy said, her fingers dancing over her control panel. "It's coming from—" "Wait!" Her voice changed, becoming excited and worried at the same time. "Captain, you need to see this." The view screen flickered and changed to show the sensor readings. At first, Jake could not understand what he was looking at. Then the computer enhanced the image, and his breath caught in his throat. "Dear God," whispered Danny. Floating in the void ahead of them was a massive alien ship. It was easily 3 times the size of the Liberty, with a sleek design that looked like nothing Jake had ever seen. But the ship was clearly in trouble. Large sections of its hull were torn open and no light showed through its windows. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Lisa worked at her sensors. "I'm reading. This can't be right. Over 3,000 life forms aboard that ship." 3,000? Amy gasped. "That's what the sensors say," Lisa confirmed. "But their energy readings are almost 0. Whatever kind of power system they use, it's nearly dead." Jake studied the damaged alien vessel. "Any signs of the attackers?" "No, sir," Lisa said. "Whatever happened here, it happened a while ago. I'm not detecting any other ships within light years of this position. Danny moved to a technical station and began running his own scans. Captain, their life support systems are failing. At the rate they're losing power, they have maybe 12 hours left. Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. 3,000 beings dying slowly in the dark. Can we dock with them? Their docking ports don't match ours, Lisa said. But there's a large breach in their hull near what looks like a cargo bay. I could get us close enough to use the shuttle. Prep the shuttle, Jake ordered. I'm going over there. Captain, Danny said carefully. We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be dangerous. They're dying, Danny. How dangerous can they be? Amy turned in her chair. Sir, I should come with you. If we make contact, you'll need a communications specialist. Jake nodded. Good thinking. Danny, you stay here and monitor our life support. If something goes wrong, you and Lisa get the Liberty out of here. I'm not leaving you over there, Lisa said firmly. That's an order, Lisa. Yes, sir, she said, but Jake could tell she did not like it. 20 minutes later, Jake and Amy were suited up and climbing into the Liberty's small shuttle. Paul Wright, the ship's medic, had joined them at the last minute, carrying his emergency medical kit. If there are 3,000 beings over there, Paul had said, you're going to need a doctor. Paul was in his 50s, a former military medic who had joined civilian ships because he was tired of treating soldiers. He was quiet most of the time, but Jake trusted his judgment completely. The shuttle crossed the space between the two ships in minutes. As they got closer, Jake could see the damage to the alien vessel was even worse than it had appeared on sensors. Whatever had attacked this ship had torn it apart with incredible violence. There, Amy pointed at a large hole in the hull. That breach goes all the way into what looks like a cargo hold. Lisa's voice came through their radios from the Liberty. I'm reading atmosphere on the other side of that breach. Thin but breathable for humans with suits. Jake guided the shuttle through the breach and into the alien ship. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the darkness, casting strange shadows on walls covered with symbols he could not read. They landed the shuttle in what had once been a cargo bay. Now it was filled with debris and strange crystalline formations that might have been equipment or art. Stay close, Jake told his companions as they left the shuttle. We don't know the layout of this ship. The first alien they encountered was lying unconscious near what looked like a control panel. Jake's breath stopped when he saw it. The being was roughly humanoid, but its skin was covered in scales that shifted color from deep blue to pale gray as they watched. It was tall and thin, with long arms and a face that was almost elegant in its alien beauty. Paul knelt beside the creature and ran his medical scanner over it. It's alive, but barely. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and what looks like radiation. Poisoning. Can you help it? Jake asked. Maybe, but I need to understand their biology better. They moved deeper into the ship, following corridors that curved in ways that made Jake's head hurt. The emergency lighting was failing, and their flashlights cut through the darkness like white swords. In what might have been a medical bay, they found more of the aliens. Some were unconscious, others were awake but too weak to move. Their scales shifted to bright orange when they saw the humans, which Amy's translator identified as extreme fear. One of the aliens, wearing what looked like a uniform with rank insignia, struggled to sit up when they approached. It spoke in the same warbling language they had heard in the distress signal. Amy activated her universal translator and held it out. The device worked for a few seconds, then produced a rough translation. Unknown ship. You came. Why? Jake stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. We heard your distress call. We came to help. The alien's scales shifted from orange to a confused pattern of blue and green. Help? Not coalition? We're human, Jake said. From Earth. The alien stared at them for a long moment, its scales cycling through colors Jake had never seen before. Finally, it spoke again. Human? Not no human. Why, help. Unknown? Because you asked for help, Jake said simply. The alien's scales turned a deep golden color. Through the translator, its voice was filled with something that sounded like wonder. I am Vashatar, captain of Sworn Harmony. We are Kalari. We dying? How long have you been here? Amy asked. 8 months. Coalition left us die. Said we broken, not worth saving. Paul finished scanning several of the unconscious Kalari and stood up. Captain, these people are in bad shape. Starvation, dehydration, system failures. If we don't do something soon, they're all going to die. Jake looked around the medical bay at the dozens of dying aliens. Through the walls, he could sense the presence of 3,000 more, all slowly dying in the darkness. Vashatar, he said, how many of your people are still alive? The alien captain's scales turned dark blue with grief. 2,800 children and adults, lost. 200 to hunger and cold. Jake felt anger building in his chest. The coalition had left these people to die. 3,000 beings, including children, abandoned in the void because someone had decided they were not worth saving. Amy, he said, get back to the shuttle and contact Lisa. Tell her we need to prepare for a rescue operation. Sir, Amy said carefully, our ship can't carry 3,000 people. Then we'll find another way, Jake said. Paul, can you help? The most critical cases? I'll do what I can, but I need to understand their biology better. Captain Vashatar's scales brightened to gold again. You really help? Risk your ship? Your crew? Jake looked into the alien captain's large, dark eyes and saw the same thing he would see in any dying person's face. Hope, mixed with the fear that hope would be crushed again. Yes, Jake said. We'll help. For the first time in 8 months, the Sworn Harmony was not silent in the void. Jake stood in the Liberty's conference room, staring at the holographic display that showed both ships. The numbers were impossible. 3,000 Kalari refugees, and his ship could maybe hold 50 people in an emergency. We could call for coalition backup, Danny said for the 3rd time. They have ships that could handle this many people. Coalition command is 3 days away, Amy replied, checking her calculations again. The Kalari don't have 3 days. Their power systems are failing faster now that we've opened their ship to scan them. Lisa leaned back in her chair, looking exhausted. Even if we stripped out all our cargo and used every inch of space, we might fit 500 people. And that's if they're smaller than humans. Paul Wright looked up from his medical tablet. I've been studying the scans of Kalari biology. They're actually larger than humans on average, and some of them are in such bad shape that moving them could kill them. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of an impossible choice. Every minute they spent talking was another minute the Kalari were dying. but rushing into a bad plan could kill everyone, including his own crew. "There has to be a way," he muttered. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "I intercepted some coalition transmissions while we were on the Kalari ship. They're not coming to help." Everyone turned to look at her. Amy's face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly. "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Amy took a deep breath. "I found communications, logs from 8 months ago. The Coalition Fleet Commander reported the Kalari ship as lost with all hands after they refused to abandon them during the attack." "They lied?" Danny asked. "They covered it up," Amy said. "As far as the Coalition records show, the Sworn Harmony was destroyed. Everyone aboard is officially dead." Lisa slammed her hand on the table. "Those bastards, they just left them here to die." Jake felt cold anger spreading through his chest. The Coalition had not just abandoned the Kalari, they had erased them from existence, pretending they were already dead so no one would look for them. "That settles it," he said. "We're not calling Coalition Command." "But, sir," Danny protested, "how are we supposed to save 3,000 people?" Jake walked over to the display and studied it again. The Sworn Harmony was huge but damaged. The Liberty was small but functional. There had to be a way to make this work. "Amy, can their ship still move? Their engines are damaged, but the basic structure seems sound." "Why?" "What if we don't try to fit everyone on the Liberty?" Jake said slowly. "What if we fix their ship enough to get it moving?" Paul frowned. "Captain, their power systems are completely shot. Even if we could repair the engines, they need life support for 3,000 people." "Then we share," Jake said. "We link the ships together and share our power and life support systems." Danny stared at him. "Sir, that could work, actually. Our industrial fabricators could make temporary power conduits. It would be dangerous as hell, but it might work." Lisa was already pulling up navigation charts. "If we could get both ships moving, the nearest human outpost is Frontier Station Omega. That's only 2 days away instead of 3. "Frontier Station?" Amy asked. "That's outside Coalition space." "Exactly," Jake said. "We get the Kalari to human territory, and the Coalition can't touch them." Paul was running calculations on his tablet. "I could set up temporary medical stations throughout both ships. With the Kalari medical staff helping, we might be able to keep everyone alive for 2 days." Jake looked around the table at his crew. They all looked scared, but they also looked determined. These were good people, and they understood what was at stake. "This plan could get us all killed," he said. "If the power sharing fails, both ships could lose life support. If the engine linkage breaks, we could be stranded out here with 3,000 dying aliens. And if we don't try," Lisa said, 3,000 people die anyway." Danny nodded. "I can make it work, Captain. It won't be pretty and it won't be safe, but I can make it work." "Amy, what about communications? Can you coordinate between both ships?" "The Kalari use quantum resonance for internal communications. It's actually more advanced than our systems. I can link into their network and create a unified command structure." Jake took a deep breath. This was the kind of plan that ended careers or made legends. There was no middle ground. "Paul, how many Kalari are critical?" "About 200 need immediate medical attention. Another 500 are in bad shape, but stable." "Can you work with their medical staff?" Paul smiled grimly. "Captain Vashatar introduced me to their chief medical officer. She's been keeping these people alive for 8 months with almost no resources. I think I can learn a lot from her." Jake walked back to the display and studied it one more time. The plan was dangerous, complex, and probably insane. It was exactly the kind of thing that gave humans their reputation for being unpredictable and reckless. "All right," he said. "We do this. Danny, start working on the power-sharing system. Lisa, plot a course to Frontier Station that avoids Coalition patrol routes. Amy, coordinate with the Kalari command staff. Paul, set up mobile medical units." "What about the cargo we're supposed to deliver?" Danny asked. Jake thought about the medical supplies sitting in their cargo hold, waiting for delivery to New Haven Colony. People at the colony needed those supplies, but the Kalari needed help, right? "Now, we'll deliver it late," he said. "I'd rather explain a delay than explain why we let 3,000 people die." Amy was already working at her communication station. "Captain, I'm getting reports from throughout the Kalari ship. They can't believe we're really going to help." "Them. Some of them think we're lying." "Can you blame them?" Lisa asked. "The Coalition left them to die. Why should they trust aliens they've never met?" "Because," Jake said, "we're not the Coalition." Over the next 6 hours, the crews of both ships worked together in a way that no one had thought possible. Human engineers worked alongside Kalari technicians to create power transfer systems that had never been tested. Medical staff shared knowledge and supplies between species that had never met before. The Kalari were amazed by how quickly humans adapted to new situations. When a standard coupling would not work, Danny simply invented a new one. When Paul's medical equipment was incompatible with Kalari physiology, he modified it on the spot. In return, the Kalari showed a level of cooperation and organization that impressed the humans. Despite being near death, they worked together smoothly, with no arguments or complaints. Captain Vashatar worked closely with Jake, translating between the two crews and sharing technical knowledge that helped solve problems faster. "Your people," Vashtar said during a brief break, "they work like they are saving their own families." "In a way we are," Jake replied. "We don't leave people behind. That's just not who we are." Vashatar's scales shifted to that golden color again. "The Coalition species, they calculate worth. Resources spent versus resources gained. They decided we were not worth the cost." "Then the Coalition is wrong," Jake said simply. As the work continued, word spread through both ships. The humans were not just rescuing the Kalari. They were treating them as equals, as people worth saving regardless of the cost. For the first time in 8 months, the Kalari children began to play again. The emergency alarm started screaming just as Jake was reviewing the final preparations for their escape from the dead zone. Red lights flashed throughout the Liberty's bridge, and Danny's voice came through the intercom, tight with panic. "Captain, the Sworn Harmony's reactor is going into cascade failure. We have maybe 20 minutes before it takes both ships with it." Jake was running before Danny finished speaking. Amy and Lisa followed him through the corridors toward the docking tube that connected the two ships. Behind them, Paul's voice echoed from the medical bay where he was treating critical Kalari patients. "Get everyone away from the reactor sections. Move them to the forward compartments now." The docking tube shook as Jake ran through it, and he could hear the deep groaning of metal under stress. The power-sharing system that Danny had rigged between the ships was overloading, trying to compensate for the failing Kalari reactor. Captain Vashatar met them at the entrance to the Sworn Harmony, his scales cycling rapidly through orange and red patterns of extreme distress. "The containment fields are breaking down," he said through Amy's translator. "My engineers tried to shut down the reactor, but the controls are not responding." "Where's Danny?" Jake asked. "He went to the reactor room with Zethara, our chief engineer. They said they could fix it, but the radiation levels..." Vashatar did not need to finish. Jake had seen radiation poisoning before, during his time in the Defense Force. It was not a quick or easy death. Amy, get on the comm. Tell Lisa to prepare for emergency separation. If we can't stop this cascade, she needs to get the Liberty. Clear. Sir. What about the Kalari? We're not leaving them, Jake said, but I won't lose my ship and crew too if this goes bad. They made their way deeper into the sworn harmony, following emergency lighting that flickered and dimmed as power fluctuated throughout the ship. Kalari families huddled in corridors, parents holding their children close as the ship shuddered around them. The reactor room was deep in the ship's core, behind multiple blast doors that were designed to contain exactly this kind of disaster. Jake and Vashatar found Danny and Zethara working frantically at a control panel, their radiation detectors clicking ominously. Zethara was a young Kalari female, her scales a natural deep purple that was now flickering with stress patterns. She was smaller than most Kalari, but her hands moved over the controls with the confidence of someone who understood the ship's systems better than anyone. "Danny!" Jake called out. "Report!" Danny looked up, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold air. The reactor's magnetic containment is failing. When the Coalition ship attacked them 8 months ago, they must have damaged the primary control systems. It's been slowly breaking down ever since. Can you fix it? Maybe. Zethara has been jury-rigging repairs for months, but she's been working with damaged parts and no replacement components. Zethara spoke rapidly in her own language, and Vashatar translated. She says the human improvisation techniques are fascinating. Your engineer thinks in ways that no Kalari would consider. Is that good or bad? Jake asked. In this case, very. Good, Danny said, pulling a panel off the wall. Look at this. Danny showed them a maze of crystalline components that looked nothing like human technology. But running through it were crude repairs made from what looked like kitchen utensils and medical equipment. She's been keeping this reactor stable for 8 months using spare parts from throughout the ship, Danny explained. It's brilliant, but it's also why the system is failing now. The temporary repairs are breaking down. The ship shuddered again, and the radiation detectors began clicking faster. How long do we have? Jake asked. 15 minutes, maybe less, Zethara said through the translator. Her voice was calm, but her scales were now bright orange with fear. Danny was already deep in the control systems, tracing power flows and checking connections. I think I can stabilize it, but I need to replace the primary containment controller, and that means going into the reactor core itself. Danny, no, Jake said. The radiation will kill you. Not if I'm fast enough. The Kalari have portable containment suits, and I can hold my breath for about 2 minutes. That should be enough time. Zethara said something urgent, and Vashatar's scales turned pale gray. She says the core chamber is flooded with plasma radiation. Even with a containment suit, no one can survive in there for more than 30 seconds. Danny grinned, but it was not a happy expression. Then I better work fast. There must be another way, Jake said. Captain, Zethara spoke directly to Amy's. Translator, your engineer is brave, but this is not possible. My people have tried everything. The reactor cannot be saved. Danny stopped working and looked at her. You've been thinking like engineers. Sometimes you need to think like a human. What does that mean? It means we don't accept impossible. Danny turned to Jake. Captain, I need you to trust me, and I need Zethara to help me. Danny, sir, 3,000 people are going to die if we don't do this, including all of us. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you how we're going to survive. Jake looked at his engineer, this quiet man who could fix anything and who was now willing to die to save people he had never met 3 days ago. Then he looked at Zethara, whose purple scales were shifting to the same determined golden color he had seen on Vashatar. "What do you need?" For the next 10 minutes, Danny and Zethara worked together in a way that should not have been possible. Human pragmatism combined with Kalari precision engineering, creating solutions that neither species would have thought of alone. They rerouted power through secondary systems that Zethara had not considered using. Danny showed her how to bypass safety protocols that were designed to prevent exactly what they were trying to do. Together, they created a plan that was completely insane and might actually work. "The containment suit will only protect me for about 45 seconds, Danny explained as Zethara helped him into the crystalline armor. "But if I can reach the core controller and replace it with this makeshift unit, the reactor should stabilize." "Should?" Jake asked. "Will," Zethara said firmly. "Your engineer's solution is elegant. It will work." Danny sealed his helmet and checked his equipment one more time. "If this goes wrong, tell Lisa she's in command, and tell her to get everyone to Frontier Station." "You're coming back," Jake said. "That's an order." "Yes, sir." Danny entered the reactor core chamber, and Jake watched on the monitors as his engineer raced against time and radiation. The core was a swirling mass of contained plasma, beautiful and deadly. Danny moved through the chamber like he had trained for this his entire life, reaching the controller and beginning the delicate work of replacement. 30 seconds. The radiation levels were climbing. 40 seconds. Danny was still working, his hands steady despite the deadly environment. 50 seconds. The new controller was almost in place. "Danny, get out of there!" Jake called over the comm. "Almost." "Got it!" Danny's voice was strained. 60 seconds. The radiation alarms were screaming now. Then suddenly the alarms stopped. The reactor, core stabilized, its wild fluctuations smoothing into the steady pulse of contained fusion. Danny staggered out of the core chamber and collapsed. Paul was already there with his medical kit, checking for radiation exposure while Zethara monitored the reactor status. "It worked," she said, her scales now brilliant gold with joy. "The reactor is stable. We have power." Jake knelt beside Danny, who was conscious but weak. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been kicked by a mule," Danny said. "But I'll live. Paul says the radiation exposure was within acceptable limits." "Barely," Paul added. "You're going to be sick for a few days, but no permanent damage." Zethara approached them, her scales cycling through patterns that the translator identified as profound gratitude. "Your engineer saved us all," she said. "His solution was, I have no word in your language. Beautiful, impossible, perfect, human," Jake said simply. As power flowed steadily through both ships and the journey to Frontier Station began, Jake reflected on what they had accomplished. 4 days ago, none of them had known the Kalari existed. Now they were risking everything to save them. It was exactly the kind of crazy, dangerous, compassionate thing that made other species nervous about humans. Jake could not be more proud of his crew. Frontier Station Omega appeared on the view screen like a small city floating among the stars. The massive station was home to 50,000 humans, families who had chosen to live on the edge of known space rather than in the crowded systems closer to Earth. "Station control is asking about our passengers," Amy reported from the communications console. "I don't think they were expecting 3,000 refugees." Jake opened a channel to the station. "Frontier Control, this is Captain Jake Morrison, of the cargo vessel USS Liberty. We have a humanitarian emergency and request immediate docking permission. The response came from a woman with a crisp military voice. Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Kate Phillips, Station Commander. We show. You're traveling with an unidentified alien vessel. Please explain your situation. Jake took a deep breath. Colonel, we rescued 3,000 Kalari refugees from a disabled ship in the dead zone. They were abandoned by coalition forces 8 months ago and left to die. They need immediate medical attention and asylum. There was a long pause before Colonel Phillips responded. Captain Morrison, please hold your position while I review the situation with my staff. Lisa looked back from the pilot's seat. Think they'll let us dock? They have to, Paul said from his position at the medical station. I've got 200 critical patients who need real medical facilities, not my field surgery. Amy was monitoring the station's communications. I'm picking up a lot of chatter. The station personnel are excited. Apparently, this is the first time anyone has brought refugees here. Captain Vashatar entered the Liberty's bridge, moving carefully on legs that were still weak from months of malnutrition. His scales were a nervous pattern of blue and green as he looked at the massive human station. Your people, he said through the translator. They will truly give us sanctuary? I hope so, Jake said honestly. Colonel Phillips is a good officer. If anyone will help, it's her. The comm system crackled to life again. Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Phillips. You're cleared for docking at Bay 7. We're preparing emergency medical facilities and temporary housing for your passengers. Jake felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Colonel. We're coming in now. Captain, Colonel Phillips continued, I should warn you. What you've done is going to cause problems with the Coalition. Frontier Station is technically outside their jurisdiction, but they won't be happy about harboring refugees they consider officially dead. Let me worry about the Coalition, Colonel. As the two ships approached the docking bay, Jake could see crowds of station personnel gathering to help. Medical teams, cargo handlers, even families with children, all waiting to assist complete strangers from another species. The docking process took 2 hours because of the massive number of people involved. Kalari families emerged from their damaged ship carrying whatever possessions they had managed to save. Human volunteers met them with food, water, and simple kindness. Jake watched from the docking bay as a human child, maybe 8 years old, offered a Kalari youngling a stuffed animal. The young Kalari's scales shifted to bright gold as it accepted the gift, and its parent's scales showed the same color of gratitude. I've never seen anything like this, Vashatar said, standing beside Jake. Your people are helping strangers without any hope of reward. That's just what we do, Jake replied. Colonel Kate Phillips approached them, a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She wore the uniform of the Earth Defense Force with the insignia of a frontier. Commander, Captain Morrison, I'm Kate Phillips. What you've done here is either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Jake admitted. Colonel Phillips smiled. In my experience, the best decisions usually are. Come on, let's get your people settled. The next few hours were controlled chaos as 3,000 Kalari refugees were processed, medically examined, and housed throughout the station. The station's medical facilities were overwhelmed, but human volunteers turned community centers, schools, and even private homes into temporary shelters. Jake found Paul in the main medical center, working alongside Kalari doctors to treat the most serious cases. The human doctor looked exhausted but satisfied. How are they doing? Jake asked. Better than I expected, Paul replied. The Kalari medical staff kept these people alive under impossible conditions. They're remarkable healers, Doctor. Nethara, the Kalari chief medical officer, approached them. She was an older female with scales that shifted to silver with age, and she moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent months conserving every bit of energy. "Dr. Wright," she said through the translator, "your medical techniques are fascinating. The way you use synthetic compounds to replace natural healing processes, it's very different from our methods." "Different how?" Paul asked. "Kalari medicine works with the body's natural systems. We enhance what is already there, but human medicine, you replace what is broken. You fight disease and injury like you are at war with them." Paul laughed. "I guess that's a pretty accurate description of human medicine." "It is effective," Dr. Nethara said. "Your approach saved lives that Kalari medicine could not." Meanwhile, Amy was working with Kalari communication specialists to establish translation protocols for the entire station. The Kalari language was complex, with emotional and social context embedded in the color patterns of their scales. "It's like they communicate on multiple levels at once," Amy explained to Jake. "Their words carry one meaning, but their scale colors add layers of emotion, social status, and intent." Zethara, the young Kalari engineer who had worked with Danny to save the reactor, was already collaborating with the station's technical staff. Her scales showed constant patterns of excitement as she learned about human engineering methods. "Your people build things to be repaired and modified," she told Danny through the translator. "Kalari technology is designed to last forever without changes, but your way allows for growth and adaptation." "Sometimes things break," Danny replied. "When they do, you fix them better than they were before." As evening settled over the station, Jake found himself in Colonel Phillips's office, looking out at the stars where the Sworn Harmony was docked beside his own ship. "You know the Coalition is going to demand these people back," Colonel Phillips said. "Let them demand," Jake replied. "The Kalari are under human protection now. Captain, I admire what you've done, but Frontier Station isn't exactly a military stronghold. If the Coalition sends a fleet, we can't protect 3,000 refugees." Jake nodded. "Then we'll have to make sure it doesn't come to that." Colonel Phillips poured 2 glasses of real whiskey, a luxury on the frontier. "What's your plan?" "I'm going to contact Earth Defense Force Command. Tell them what really happened to the Kalari. Once the human government knows the Coalition deliberately abandoned these people, they'll have to take a stand. And if Earth decides it's not worth a war with the Coalition..." Jake sipped his whiskey and thought about Captain Vashitar's words. About the Coalition calculating worth like an equation, deciding some lives were more valuable than others. "Then, we'll find another way," he said. "Humans don't abandon people. That's not who we are." Outside the office windows, Jake could see Kalari and human families walking together through the station corridors. Children from both species were playing games that needed no translation. Adults were sharing meals and stories despite the language barrier. In the medical centers, human and Kalari doctors worked side by side, learning from each other and saving lives. In the technical sections, engineers from both species were already designing improvements to station systems. "Colonel," Jake said, "I think we're about to find out what humans are really made of." Colonel Phillips raised her glass. "To dangerous decisions and the people brave enough to make them." As they drank, neither of them noticed the long-range A sensors detecting ships entering the outer system. Coalition vessels traveling fast and heading directly for Frontier Station. The real test was about to begin. The Coalition fleet arrived 3 days after the Kalari refugees had settled into their new temporary homes. Jake was having breakfast with Captain Vashatar in the station's main dining hall when the emergency alarms started wailing. All station. Personnel to emergency stations. Colonel Phillips's voice echoed through the corridors. We have incoming coalition vessels. This is not a drill. Jake and Vashatar rushed to the command center, where they found chaos. The main display showed 12 coalition ships in formation, led by a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even Frontier Station. Identification confirmed, Amy reported from her position at the communications console. She had volunteered to stay and help coordinate between human and Kalari refugees. The lead ship is the CSS Retribution, flagship of Admiral Thexmore of Fade, the Hegemony. Colonel Phillips looked grim. Thexmore is bad news. He's one of the Coalition's hardliners. Believes in their superiority doctrine completely. The main communications channel crackled to life with an alien voice speaking heavily. Accented standard English. Human station. This is Admiral Thexmore of the Galactic Coalition Fleet. You are harboring criminals and diseased refugees in violation of quarantine protocols. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences. Colonel Phillips stepped up to the communications panel. Admiral Thexmore, this is Colonel Kate Phillips, commanding officer of Frontier Station Omega. The beings you refer to as criminals are refugees under human protection. We will not surrender them. Colonel Phillips, you do not understand the situation. These Kalari carry genetic defects that make them dangerous to other species. They were quarantined for the safety of the galaxy. By harboring them, you threaten every civilized world. Jake felt anger building in his chest. He had spent 3 days living alongside the Kalari refugees. He had seen their children playing with human kids, watched their doctors save human lives, witnessed their engineers improve station systems. That's a lie, Jake said into the comm. I've seen the Kalari medical records. There are no genetic defects. And who might you be? Admiral Thexmore asked, his voice dripping with contempt. Captain Jake Morrison, the officer who rescued these people from certain death. Ah, the infamous human who thinks he knows better than the entire Galactic Coalition. Captain Morrison, your species' arrogance continues to astound us. Captain Vashatar stepped forward, his scales shifting to the deep gold color that Jake now recognized as determination. Admiral Thexmore, he said through the translator, I am Vashatar of the Sworn Harmony. You know me. You were there when you left us to die. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Captain Vashatar, you and your people were declared lost with all hands. According to Coalition records, you are already dead. Yet here we stand, alive because these humans risked everything to save strangers. A mistake we are here to correct. The sea. Coalition fleet moved closer, their weapons powering up. Frontier Station's defenses were impressive for a civilian outpost, but they could not stand against 12 warships. Colonel Phillips opened a private channel to Jake. Captain, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Is there any chance these people really are dangerous? Any reason the Coalition might have had for abandoning them? Jake thought about everything he had seen over the past 3 days. Kalari children playing with toys donated by human families. Kalari doctors working 18-hour shifts to help sick humans. Kalari engineers voluntarily improving station systems for people they had just met. Colonel, if the Kalari are dangerous, it's only because they make the Coalition look bad by comparison. Colonel Phillips nodded. That's what I thought. Amy, get me a priority channel to Earth Defense Force Command. The next hour was filled with tense communications as Colonel Phillips tried to reach someone in authority who could help. But Earth was far away, and the political situation was complicated. Finally, Ambassador Ryan Foster appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from Earth's capital. He was a thin, nervous man in an expensive suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "Colonel Phillips, Captain Morrison, I've been briefed on the situation. The Coalition is demanding that we turn over the Kalari refugees immediately." "Sir," Jake said, "these people are under human protection. We can't just hand them over to die." "Captain, I understand your feelings, but we must consider the bigger picture. Earth has trade agreements worth trillions of credits with the Coalition species. If we're declared a rogue world, our colonies will be cut off from galactic commerce." Colonel Phillips stepped forward. "Ambassador, with respect, we're talking about 3,000 lives. And I'm talking about billions of human lives who depend on those trade relationships," Foster replied. "The Coalition has made their position clear. Either we surrender the Kalari, or they will declare humanity a rogue species and impose a complete economic blockade." Jake felt the weight of impossible choices. If Earth was cut off from galactic trade, human colonies throughout the galaxy would suffer. Food shipments, medical supplies, industrial equipment, all of it would be stopped. "How long do we have?" Colonel Phillips asked. "Admiral Thexmore is giving you 6 hours to turn over the refugees. After that, they will take them by force." The channel closed, leaving the command center in silence. Jake looked around at the faces of his crew, station personnel, and Kalari leaders. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for him to find a solution. That might not exist. Captain Vashitar approached him, his scales cycling through patterns of resignation and grief. "Captain Morrison," he said quietly, "my people are grateful for what you have done, but we will not be the cause of suffering for your species. We will surrender ourselves to Admiral Thexmore." "No," Jake said firmly. "We don't abandon people. Ever. But your ambassador is correct. The Coalition will destroy your trade relationships. Your people will suffer." Jake looked out at the main display, where the Coalition fleet waited like vultures. 12 warships against 1 frontier station, and a small cargo vessel. The odds were impossible. "Amy," he said, "I need you to send a message on all human frequencies. Every ship, every station, every colony in human space." "What message, Captain?" Jake walked over to the communications panel and activated the general broadcast system. When he spoke, his voice carried to every human outpost in the galaxy. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Liberty. 3 days ago, my crew and I discovered 3,000 Kalari refugees who had been abandoned to die in space by Coalition forces. We brought them to Frontier Station Omega, where they have been welcomed by the human community." He paused, looking at Vashitar and the other Kalari leaders who were listening. "Now the Coalition demands that we surrender these people back to them. They threaten economic blockade if we refuse. They want us to choose between our economy and our conscience." Jake took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera. "I've seen Kalari children playing with human kids. I've watched Kalari doctors save human lives. I've worked alongside Kalari engineers who improved our station systems just because they wanted to help." His voice grew stronger. "The Coalition says these people are worthless. They're wrong. They're not worthless. They're people, and humans don't abandon people." The broadcast ended, and the command center fell silent again. Ambassador Foster's face appeared on the screen again, red with anger. "Captain Morrison, you have no authority to speak for humanity." "Maybe not," Jake replied, "but I can speak for humans." Outside, the Coalition fleet continued its steady approach, weapons ready. The choice had been made. Now they would all live or die with the consequences. The Coalition fleet had formed a perfect attack formation around Frontier Station when the first human ships began arriving. Jake watched the tactical display in amazement as ship after ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. USS Denver, requesting permission to join the party, came a gruff voice over the communications channel. "This is the cargo vessel Happy Hauler," said another captain. "We brought some friends." "Frontier Station, this is Admiral Nicole Barnes aboard the USS Defiance. Sorry we're late to the show." Jake could hardly believe what he was seeing. Military vessels, cargo ships, passenger liners, even mining vessels. Ships from every corner of human space were arriving to stand with Frontier Station. Colonel Phillips opened a channel to Admiral Barnes. "Admiral, what's your status?" "Have 47 vessels and counting, Colonel. Every ship that could make the journey in time. Seems your Captain Morrison's message reached a lot of people." Amy was monitoring communications from the arriving ships. "Captain, I'm getting reports from all over human space. The message has been broadcast on every network. People are calling it the Morrison Declaration." Jake felt embarrassed. "I was just trying to do the right thing." "Sometimes that's enough," Colonel Phillips said. Admiral Thexmore's voice cut through the human communications. "Human fleet, you are interfering with a coalition police action. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Barnes responded with ice in her voice. "Admiral Thexmore, this is Admiral Nicole Barnes of the Earth Defense Force. The beings you're trying to capture are under human protection. We suggest you withdraw." "Admiral Barnes, you are outnumbered. We have 12 heavy warships. You have a collection of cargo vessels and outdated military ships." "Maybe," Admiral Barnes replied. "But we have something you don't have." "And what is that?" "We're right." The standoff continued for another hour as more human ships arrived. Jake spent the time coordinating with the Kalari refugees, making sure they were safe in the station's protected areas. He found Captain Vashatar in one of the temporary shelters, surrounded by Kalari children. The old captain was telling them stories, his scales shifting to gentle patterns that kept the younglings calm despite the danger outside. "Your people came," Vashatar said when he saw Jake. "I did not think it was possible." "Neither did I," Jake admitted. "But humans can surprise you." "Why do they risk so much for strangers?" Jake thought about that question. "Because they're not strangers anymore. The moment we decided to help you, you became our people too." Amy's voice came over the station's internal communications. "Captain Morrison, please report to the command center. We're receiving a priority message from Earth." Jake hurried back to find the command center in chaos. Multiple screens showed communications from Earth, the Coalition fleet, and the growing human fleet. In the center of it all, Ambassador Foster looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Captain Morrison," Foster said, "what have you done? Every major news network is carrying your message. There are protests in the streets demanding we protect the Kalari refugees." "Good," Jake said simply. "Good. The Coalition is threatening to declare war. This could destroy everything we've built with them." Before Jake could respond, another voice cut into the communications. It was President Maria Santos of Earth, broadcasting from the Capitol. "Ambassador Foster, this is the President. I'm ordering you to cease all negotiations with the Coalition regarding the surrender of Kalari refugees." Foster looked stunned. "Madam President, the economic consequences?" "Will be managed," President Santos said firmly. "The Earth Council has voted. The Kalari refugees are now under official Earth protection. Any attack on them will be considered an act of war against humanity. Admiral Thexmore's response was immediate and angry. President Santos, you have just declared your species an enemy of galactic order. The consequences will be severe. Admiral, President Santos replied, the consequences of abandoning innocent people to die would be far worse for our souls. Jake felt a surge of pride in his species. When it mattered, when lives were on the line, humans chose to do what was right instead of what was easy, but Admiral Thexmore was not finished. Very well. If humanity insists on protecting these genetic defectives, then humanity will share their fate. All ships prepare to attack. The Coalition fleet moved forward, weapons charging. On the human side, Admiral Barnes gave her own orders. All ships, defensive formation, protect the station at all costs. Jake watched the tactical display as two fleets prepared for battle. The Coalition had heavier ships and more firepower, but the humans had numbers and determination. Then something unexpected happened. Coalition ships, this is Captain Erixtal of the Avian Commonwealth vessel Starwing. We are withdrawing from this operation. Admiral Thexmore's voice was filled with rage. Captain Erixtal, you will follow orders. Negative, Admiral. I have reviewed the evidence provided by the human ships. The Kalari refugees pose no threat. This operation violates Coalition law regarding the protection of non-combatants. 3 Coalition ships broke formation and moved away from the attack group. Jake realized that Amy had been busy during the standoff, transmitting the evidence. They had gathered about the Kalari abandonment to ships throughout the Coalition fleet. Captain Zexila of the Aquatic Union agrees, came another voice. These Kalari are refugees, not criminals. We will not participate in their murder. 2 more Coalition ships withdrew. Admiral Thexmore now had only 7 ships, while the human fleet had grown to over 60 vessels, but the Admiral was not ready to give up. Remaining ships target the human flagship. If we eliminate their command structure, the rest will surrender. The CSS Retribution fired first, its heavy plasma cannons targeting the USS Defiance. Admiral Barnes's ship shook under the impact, but held together. Return fire, Barnes ordered. All ships, engage at will. The space around Frontier Station erupted in weapons fire as the 2 fleets clashed. Jake watched in horror and amazement as cargo ships and mining vessels fought alongside military vessels, their crews showing the same determination that had brought them here. The battle was brief, but intense. The Coalition ships were individually more powerful, but they were outnumbered, and their crews were divided. Captain Erixtal and the other withdrawal ships had taken many of the Coalition's most honorable officers with them. Admiral Thexmore's ship, damaged and outnumbered, finally ceased fire. This is not over, the Admiral transmitted. The Coalition will remember this betrayal. So will we, Admiral Barnes replied. As the remaining Coalition ships withdrew, Jake felt a mixture of relief and worry. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. Captain Erixtal's ship approached Frontier Station, and the avian commander requested permission to come aboard. Captain Morrison, the tall, bird-like alien, said when they met, I must apologize for the actions of my government. What was done to the Kalari was unconscionable. Thank you for standing with us, Jake replied. Captain Erixtal's feathers ruffled in what Jake learned was the avian equivalent of a smile. It seems humans are not the only species capable of choosing conscience over convenience. As the human fleet began to disperse, returning to their duties throughout human space, Jake reflected on what had happened. A simple cargo run had become a galactic incident. The rescue of one ship had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. But, most importantly, 3,000 Kalari refugees were alive and safe. Sometimes, Jake thought, that was enough to change everything. 6 months after the battle at Frontier Station, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed USS Sanctuary, watching the construction of new Kalari on the planet below. The world had been a lifeless rock before the refugees arrived, but now it showed signs of the remarkable transformation that Kalari terraforming technology could achieve. "The atmospheric processors are working better than we expected," Zethara reported. Her scales, showing the bright blue patterns that Jake had learned, indicated scientific excitement. "Your human industrial techniques combined with our crystalline technology are creating results neither species achieved alone." Jake nodded, still amazed by how quickly the partnership between humans and Kalari had developed. The young Kalari engineer had become the chief technical officer of the Joint Colonization Project, working alongside Danny Rodriguez to create innovations that surprised both species. "Captain Morrison," Amy called from the communications station. "We're getting another distress signal." Jake walked over to her station where Captain Vashitar was already studying the readings. The old Kalari's scales showed the golden determination that Jake had come to associate with rescue operations. "Where is it coming from?" Jake asked. "The Rigel sector," Amy replied. "It's using Coalition emergency codes, but the language, it's not one I recognize." "Another abandoned species?" Vashitar asked. Over the past 6 months, they had rescued 4 other groups of refugees that the Coalition had declared extinct or dangerous. Each time, they found people who had been abandoned for the same reason as the Kalari. They possessed something valuable that other Coalition species wanted. "Lisa, set course for the Rigel sector," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed." Lisa Grant looked back from the pilot's seat with a grin. "I was hoping you'd say that. The Sanctuary is ready for another rescue." The ship that had once been the USS Liberty was now the flagship of humanity's refugee rescue fleet. She had been upgraded with the best technology from multiple species, and her crew included humans, Kalari, and members of the other species they had rescued. As they prepared to enter faster-than-light travel, Jake received a priority message from Earth. President Santos appeared on the main screen looking older but more confident than she had 6 months ago. "Captain Morrison, I wanted to update you on the political situation before you left on another rescue mission." "How bad is it, Madam President?" President Santos smiled. "Actually, it's better than expected. The Coalition is split into 3 factions. Admiral Thexmore leads the hardliners who want to declare war on humanity. But Captain Irixtal and the Avian Commonwealth have formed a moderate faction that supports our refugee protection policies." "What about the 3rd faction?" "The Aquatic Union and several smaller species have created what they call the Humanitarian Coalition. They're following our lead and actively searching for abandoned refugees." Jake felt a surge of hope. "So we're not alone anymore." "Far from it. The Kalari have shared their historical records with us, Captain. Over the past century, the Coalition has abandoned or destroyed over 50 species. Most of them are listed as extinct, but our new allies believe many might still have survivors." Amy looked up from her station. 50 species? That's genocide on a massive scale. "Which is why your work is so important," President Santos continued. "Every species you save, every refugee you rescue, proves that the Coalition's way is wrong." The message ended, and Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Paul Wright was training Kalari medical students in human emergency techniques. Danny Rodriguez was working with engineers from 3 different species to improve the ship's rescue capabilities. Amy Carter had become an expert in over a dozen alien languages. "Captain," Amy said, "there's something else about this new distress signal. The voice sounds young, like children." Jake felt the familiar anger building in his chest. Children. The Coalition had abandoned children to die in space. How long? To reach them? He asked Lisa. 18 hours at maximum speed. Do it! As the USS Sanctuary jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake walked through the ship's corridors. In the hydroponics bays, human farmers worked alongside Kalari agricultural specialists to grow food for the growing refugee population. In the workshops, engineers from multiple species collaborated on new technologies that none of them could have developed alone. He found Captain Vashitar in what they called the memory room, a quiet space where refugees from all the rescued species could honor their dead and remember their lost homeworlds. "Regrets?" Vashitar asked, his scales showing, the gentle silver patterns of peaceful contemplation. "About rescuing you? Never. About what it has cost your species, the trade restrictions, the diplomatic tensions, the military buildup. Your people have sacrificed much to do what is right." Jake thought about that. It was true that humanity's relationship with the old coalition had been damaged, perhaps permanently. Trade was more difficult, diplomatic relations were strained, and Earth was spending massive resources on military preparations. But they had also gained something valuable. The rescued species were sharing their knowledge, their technology, their cultures with humanity. The Kalari terraforming techniques were revolutionizing human colonization efforts. The Crystalline Empire's mathematics had advanced human computer systems by decades. The Singing Pod's communication methods were changing how humans understood language itself. "Vashtar," Jake said, "my species has a saying, the right thing is rarely the easy thing. What we've lost in trade agreements, we've gained in allies, who chose to stand with us because of our principles, not our power." The old Kalari's scales shifted to the deep gold of profound respect. "Your species continues to amaze me, Jake Morrison. When the Coalition calculated the worth of my people, they saw only cost. When humans calculated the same equation, you saw 3,000 lives that mattered." "Every life matters," Jake said simply. Amy's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Captain Morrison, please report to the bridge. We're approaching the source of the distress signal." Jake and Vashitar hurried to the bridge where they found the crew staring at the main view screen in shock. Floating in space was not one ship, but dozens of them. Small vessels, barely spaceworthy, connected together with cables and improvised docking tunnels. "My God," Paul breathed. "It's a whole refugee fleet." Amy was working frantically at her communications console. "I'm getting signals from all the ships. Multiple species, Captain. It looks like they found each other." Found. "Each other?" Captain Yurixtal's voice came through the communication system. He had insisted on joining this rescue mission aboard his ship, the Star Wing, which was following the Sanctuary. "Captain Morrison, these appear to be survivors from multiple species that the Coalition declared extinct. Somehow, they managed to find each other and band together for survival." Jake studied the improvised fleet. "How many?" "I'm reading life signs from over 10,000 beings," Lisa reported. "Captain, their power systems are failing. They don't have long. All ships, prepare for emergency rescue operations," Jake ordered. "This is going to be our biggest operation yet." As the USS Sanctuary and her escort ships moved in to begin the rescue, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple distress call and a decision to help strangers. Now it had become something much larger, a movement that was changing the galaxy. Amy looked up from her communications station with tears in her eyes. "Captain, I'm getting messages from the refugee fleet. They're saying they knew someone would come. They had faith that someone would hear their call for help." How could they know that? Because word has spread throughout the galaxy. When species are abandoned now, they don't give up hope. They know that humans will answer the call. Jake felt the weight of that responsibility, but also the pride. His species had become known throughout the galaxy for one thing above all others. They didn't leave people behind. As the rescue operations began and the refugee fleet's survivors were brought aboard human ships, Jake received one final communication. It was from a young being whose species he didn't recognize, speaking through a translator in a voice full of hope. "Thank you for coming," the young alien said. "We knew you would. Everyone knows that humans answer when someone calls for help." Jake looked out at the stars where more distress signals were waiting to be heard. The galaxy was a big place, full of people who needed help. But humanity was no longer alone in answering those calls. "Amy," he said, "start scanning for more distress signals. We have work to do." "Yes, sir," Amy replied with a smile. "No one dies alone on our watch." As the USS Sanctuary set course for the next rescue, Jake knew that they had started something that would outlast them all. The galaxy would never be the same because one species had decided that every life mattered, no matter the cost. And in the end, that had made all the difference.